Welcome, everybody. John Arvosis here. Sorry I set the room up late. I'm guessing folks are going to be filing it a little later than usual. Sorry about that. Oops. John Arvosis here. This is the Arvosis Report. We're here to talk about the latest news from Ukraine. We'll sit and talk to you guys a second while we wait for the. I'll wait for the TikTokers because, like I said, normally I start TikTok and it's like boom, within a minute max, they're all there. So then I got to dive in. So we'll do a quick hello here. But yes, sorry, I forgot to set the room up. Oops. What do you do? What do you do? Anyway. Anyway, how are things? Hello, all. Anybody who's new on YouTube watching this later, we usually take the first minute or two just to say hello. Everybody weighs in. Actually say where you guys are from again, because people still do check this on. Like twice as many people, or I should say an equal number of people watch on YouTube later, which is interesting. So maybe give a quick little who you are or where you're from at least. And you know what? I'll start the TikTok anyway, even though I know we started. I set it up a little late. Sorry. All right, here we go. Starting TikTok. Oopa. All right, there's the TikTokers. Boom. Boom. Oops, don't do that. Boom. There we go. Oh, well. Actually, I did mess that up a little. That's all right. We'll live. Penny, Connie, TikTokers, welcome. Oh, hello, everybody. I was just saying hi to the YouTubers and the rest of the folks over here. Hey, Sammy. How are you? Cindy, good to see you. You finally found, been looking everywhere for days. I'm around. It's just, TikTok is funny that way. It doesn't seem to always let people know where you are. They're kind of funny. Anyway, hello, TikTokers. Hello, peace. The TikTokers are finally flooding in. Hello, Denver, California, North Pole, Alaska. I've been to Alaska a lot. Never made it to North Pole. No, I never did, actually. I think the closest I got was Nome, which was very cold and rainy. And I was there when Richard Gere was there. That was a whole funny story. The waitress came up and she was like, Richard Gere is here. It was very exciting at the little coffee shop in Nome. Richard Gere was a big deal 30 years ago when I saw him in Nome. We'll leave it at that. Anyway, hey guys, welcome TikTokers, welcome everybody else. I am John Arvosis. This is the Arvosis Report. This is my daily show where we go through the latest news from Ukraine. The way the show works, about the first half hour, I'm going to give you the latest news, why I think it matters, and then we do the second half of the show is questions and answers all about Ukraine. So on TikTok, please give me your questions. There's a Q&A link in my profile. Just hit that link for your questions. The rest of you obviously use the comment box. And finally, I am independent media, so your support matters and helps me out. Please do subscribe on TikTok, follow me on YouTube and everywhere else, or vice versa, follow and subscribe. I do have YouTube running over there. That's why I keep looking back and forth. YouTubers, I've got TikTok over there. Let's dive right in. Oh, and finally, keep the gifts coming. Your gifts on TikTok help support my work. Please do keep and Addie. Thank you for that right there. And the super chat questions and the super stickers and everything else on YouTube. Let's dive right in, guys. So NATO foreign ministers met today, and I think it was in Bucharest, and they pledged yet again that someday Ukraine would be a member of NATO. Now, that's all well and good until you sort of dig in a little deeper and you find out, thank you, El, until you find out that NATO pledged in 2008, 15 years ago, or 14 and a half years ago, that Ukraine would be a member of NATO. So the fact that NATO is again pledging someday Ukraine will be a member of NATO doesn't really mean anything because they said that 14 to 15 years ago. So again, it's nice. It's nice. I mean, it's nice that they did it. I will say that Jens Stoltenberg, thank you, Annie, who's the Secretary General of NATO, did give a very. Oh, did I put the wrong topic list up? Oh, I did. I've got the wrong topic list up on YouTube. You know what I did actually? I had the right topic list, and then or did I? Oh, you know what? Hang on a second. Hang on, all. I will take that one down. Sorry, I'm multitasking here as I talk to you guys. I have on YouTube, I'm able to put up a topic list, but I put up the wrong one. One quick second, guys, and we will continue talking about NATO. Actually, I can tell you while I'm doing this. So yeah, my concern with NATO is, it's nice that they it's nice that they sort of say they want Ukraine. Now, the one thing that was good was Stoltenberg, who is the Secretary General of NATO, did give a very impassioned plea about it that was interesting. I mean, it was really quite. Seemed to be quite moved as he was talking about it. That's great. I've always had the impression that Stoltenberg has been kind of one of the more aggressively pro-Ukrainian folks out there, even more so, I would say, than Biden and the U.S. So, I guess I'm not surprised that he's sort of pushing it. But in any case, it's good. It's good that he's pushing it. Let's talk about electricity a little bit. Russia, as we know, keeps hitting Ukraine's electrical grid and electrical generating capacity and water. Their goal is basically to freeze the Ukrainians over the winter. I mean, that's the goal here. Thank you, Aqualimus, for that. That's the goal. And what's interesting to me is what our goal is here. And what I mean is, in terms of responding to Putin's ongoing assault on the electrical generation and all of that, the U.S. is giving Ukraine another $53 million of aid for equipment to help repair its electrical infrastructure that Putin keeps hitting. The U.S. is hoping that this seed money almost will help get European allies to also start kicking in their money. And all I can guess is that, and I'd read something today, one analysis, which I thought was interesting, that was saying, Putin can throw hundreds of missiles if he wants at Ukraine. They're just going to keep rebuilding the electrical infrastructure. Now, I don't know whether that's possible, but what I mean is, at some point, you'd think if you blow up enough power plants, you don't have power plants left, right? So I don't know, but at least to date, the Ukrainians have been able to get the power back online again and again. Now, mind you, they have had outages. They've had rolling outages where they basically turn off the power for 12 hours, in this neighborhood, but turn it on in that neighborhood, and then they switch, right? And then the other one gets power and you don't, to try to, ration it. But it was interesting because the one analysis I saw said that basically Putin could be wasting all of his missiles at this point, because once he runs out of missiles, then what does he do? Because then the Ukrainians just get the power back up again. Now, the concern I would have there is these Ukrainian drones that the Russians keep buying more of. Second of all, we also, thank you, Ginger, we also know, so we got the drones. Then we know that the Russians at least are talking about building these Iranian drones on Russian soil. That's a second concern. And third, that Russia reportedly had reached a deal with Iran to buy a bunch of Iranian missiles that would also be used to shoot into Ukraine. So, let's see. I'm not fully convinced that Russia's going to run out of missiles and Ukraine's power is going to be back up, but let's see. With the power question, one interesting sort of story that popped up today is the Russians are claiming, actually the regional governor is claiming, and now this is the Sudza district bordering Ukraine's Sumy Oblast. Now let me look here and see. I didn't have time before the show. Oops, my TikTok is talking to me. I didn't have time before the show. Thank you, dear Benji, for the crown. Let me look here. Sumy, I'm sure, SUNY, New York, of course. Sumy Oblast, Ukraine. Let me see here, and I can show you on my handy dandy map, and you all can do a drink. Okay. It's right north of Kharkiv. It is just north of Kharkiv. Okay. So basically, we are going to be talking about a region in Russia that is, here's Sumy, the capital, right here. So the capital is Sumy, the region is Sumy. So we're talking about a region of Russia that is right here across the border, okay, from Ukraine. Now, what I'm talking about is the regional governor says that the Ukrainians attacked the region today, basically across the border. And at first I was reading that and going, BS. I'm not sure I believe this, because the Russians like to say that, and the Ukrainians don't generally attack across the border. But then I heard that it was a power supply facility that was reportedly hit. And that, which caused blackouts in the area, that to me sounds like Ukraine. Because honestly, at some point, Ukraine needs to up the ante to Russia and start saying, you know what? I mean, somebody does. NATO's not doing it. I mean, we're not upping the ante at all. We're not telling Russia, if you keep knocking out Ukraine's power, you keep trying to freeze everybody to death, then we're going to do something you didn't want. Maybe it's provide some weapons. that we haven't to date, like longer range missiles, right? But something, you've got to make Russia pay some kind of a price if they're going to keep doing this. And it looks like the Ukrainians may have just done that. The Ukrainians may have just said, you know what? You knock out our power, we're going to knock out your power. And we're going to keep knocking out your power. Gimp, I'm not even going to say your name. Somebody was complaining about the map, folks. Let him know we love our little t-shirt map. Someday maybe, but we love our little t-shirt map. Just a quick reset real quick for anybody who's new. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. This is my daily show where we go over the latest news from Ukraine for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then I take your questions and we discuss the issues of the day. Feel free to pose your questions on TikTok, on YouTube, on TikTok. Oh, the dog wants to be covered up. Here you go. All right. You want to be covered? There you go. Okay. I'm getting a whine from the dog. Feel free to submit your questions on TikTok in the Q&A link in my profile, on YouTube and everywhere else. Use the comments at the bottom. And please do keep the gifts coming, the gifts on TikTok, the gifts on YouTube. They help support my work, and I really appreciate it. And do follow me. Please subscribe and follow. So another story here, the Pope. So the Pope is being a kind of a goof, and I don't understand what's up with this man. So, there's been issues before with the Pope kind of going back and forth and on the whole Ukraine thing, right? Sometimes could you hear Sasha whining? Yeah, that by the way, when my dog makes a whine, whenever she wants me to cover her up and she can't get covered up because she likes being under stuff and nobody believes me. I'm like, she makes a certain sound, which means I can't get the blanket on, cover me. That was the sound. You heard it. Okay. She's a little spoiled. She has me trained, but she's smart. I'll give her that. So the Pope has been kind of going back and forth with this super pro Ukraine and super playing both sides kind of thing. Well, he kind of did a both sides thing again the other day. Let me read you this quote from the Pope. And everybody was, and the best part is the Russians are livid about this quote from the Pope, which cracks me up because it's a really awful quote. Listen to this. When I speak about Ukraine, I speak of a people who are martyred. If you have a martyred people, you have someone who martyrs them, right? So he's saying if the people are martyred, somebody must be doing the harm to them. Okay, listen to this. When I speak about Ukraine, I speak about the cruelty because I have much information about the cruelty of the troops that come in. So he's on a roll and you're going, okay, you're calling the Russians cruel. This is good. Generally, the cruelest, in other words, the most cruel, are perhaps those who are of Russia, but are not of the Russian tradition, such as Chechens, the Buryati, and so on. So now he's starting to say, but when it comes down to it, the cruel ones aren't those Russians. It's all the dark people. It's the Muslims. I mean, you can imagine the Ukrainians and everybody, the Europeans are going like, are you out of your mind? Oh yeah, the Russians. The Russians are the nice ones. So listen to this. The Chechens and the Buryati, certainly the one who invades is the Russian state. So he's like, of course, I get that Russia invaded. This is very clear. Sometimes I try not to specify so as not to offend and rather condemn in general, although it is well known whom I am condemning. It is not necessary that I put a name and surname. So he's saying sometimes I condemn in general, but we all know who I'm condemning. I don't think he means we all know I'm condemning Russia. He means we all know I'm condemning those Muslims in Russia. But again, perhaps those who are of Russia, but are not of the Russian tradition. He's saying the people who aren't Christians. He's saying the good Russians, the Christians are good Russians. They're not the ones committing all the crimes and cruelty in Ukraine. I got news for you. I got some Eastern Europeans you could talk to if you want to know about Russian cruelty. Talk to the Poles, talk to the Baltic states, Hungary, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia. Right? Talk to Czechs and the Slovaks. Talk to the Germans, East Germans. If you want to know about Russian cruelty, horrific what the Russians did. The Russians imprisoned, and I mean, it was the Soviet Union, but it was mostly Russia. The Russians imprisoned half of Europe for almost 50 years after World War II. They kidnapped half of Europe and ran it as a brutal, murderous dictatorship. I mean, I don't know what the Pope is up to with this stuff. I don't know what the heck he's up to with this. It's really weird. But suffice it to say, he pissed off a lot of Ukrainians, but he really pissed off a lot of the Europeans as well, who are just going like, what are you talking about? The Russian tradition. If you just let the Christian Russians, they're such nice people. It's those Muslims, It honestly, it is racist. I'm sorry. He means the Muslim. The Chechens are Muslim, not of the Russian tradition. Please. Okay, Kanye. We know perfectly well what you mean, Kanye. Anyway, Ukraine registered, exactly, the cat scratch. Ukraine registered nearly 48,000 alleged Russian war crane. I can't speak today. Russian war cranes. That would be kind of interesting. War cranes. Ukraine registered nearly 48,000 Russian war crimes. President Zelensky's chief of staff, thank you, Gordon, for that, said when our law enforcement agencies conducted, this is actually kind of a creepy story. So the Ukrainians are giving more details on the war crimes that they're uncovering. They're saying that they found 48,000 already. I'm going to read you a little, I'm going to read you a little bit of detail, but honestly, I'm not even sure I'm comfortable reading these details. This is the quote from the President Zelensky's chief of staff. When our law enforcement agencies conducted an exhumation in Izium, meaning they dig up the dead body, in Kharkiv, northeastern Ukraine, they found a minor girl, so a girl who was underage, who was first raped and then brutally killed. They found a boy whose was cut off before execution. A boy. We're talking underage here, okay? We discover such terrible things every time we liberate a new settlement. Then Dmitry Lubinets, the Ukrainian parliament's commissioner for human rights, reported in November that new facts of torture reportedly inflicted by Russian troops on Kherson Oblast residents during the occupation were discovered, including a torture chamber where a separate cell for teenagers was kept. That was it. Separate cell for teenagers. Now, Kherson, we'll show you the map again. Kherson is the region the Ukrainians are sort of in the process of liberating now. Kherson, this region here, where the Ukrainians liberated the land north of the river. So it's still in the Kherson province, and now are fighting basically to get the southern part. Zero proof. Yeah, zero proof, except lots of dead bodies, little person who's leaving. Yeah, you're leaving. If you're not a troll, you can petition later. All right. Sorry, had to get rid of that troll. Sometimes I like to knock them out myself. The Daily Beast is reporting. Oh, thank you, dear Benji. The Daily Beast is reporting that Russia's infamous Wagner group this is really kind of a creepy story. Okay, let me give you a double story here. So first of all, there was news today that the young African student, 23 years old, who was killed in Ukraine fighting for the Russians, he was in fact offered a deal that they would let him out of prison because they arrested him for a drug charge. Again, could be legit, might not be legit. This is what the Russians do. They don't have a fair system of jurisprudence. Thank you, KMJ. But they offered him clemency if he'd go fight in Ukraine. So he went to Ukraine because otherwise he was facing 9 years, I think, in jail in Russia in a penal colony, which is horrific. And the poor kid got killed. So with that in mind, Russia's Wagner group, which is a mercenary group, paid soldiers, but they're paid murderers, really. I mean, horrific organization. Friend of Putin runs it. Is freeing, this is from the Daily Beast, is freeing hardened rebels held in jail cells in the Central African Republic and deploying them overseas, including in Ukraine's Donbass in the eastern Ukraine. According to sources in the Central African Republic, where armed rebels have controlled large parts of the country for about a decade, dozens of men held in military and police custody for crimes such as rape and murder are now being recruited into Wagner's local wing, which includes hundreds of fighters commonly referred to as Black Russians. Many of the recruits are rebels the military considers to be terrorists because of their unlawful use of violence and intimidation against civilians. I mean, again, Pope, got news for you. It's not the Chechens who's hiring these people. It's Vladimir Putin's very white, very Christian top buddy, Prigozhin, who's hiring these people, and happy to hire murderers to come and commit war crimes in Ukraine. So somebody needs to set the Pope a little bit straight here. Just to remind folks, I am John Aravosis. You're listening to the Aravosis Report. Hello, Dimitrios in Greece. How are you? I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report, my daily report, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine, and then I take your guys' questions. Please do submit your questions in the Q&A link in my profile here on the little box there. And please do keep the gifts coming, super chat, super stickers on you guys, and you guys, exactly like Dear Benji just did, those gifts. You help support my work by doing that. Thank you. And please do follow and subscribe on all these services. Also, check out my Patreon. I've got a Patreon, patreon.com/Aravosis, that you guys can help that way too. Just give $5. I wouldn't mind it a month. Also, I've got a Discord as well. Check out the Discord. Discord, what is it? I'm already forgetting my Discord. Aravosis.discord. I'm already forgetting my Discord address. Thank you, Annie, for the whale. Thank you, Annie, for that. I'm already forgetting my Discord address. I think it's discord.aravosis.com, but the best way you can find all of those addresses, just go to aravosis.com, and it's the link to all of my links. It's my link tree. Thank you, Inspired, for the Paw Fest there. That's funny. And thank you again for the whale, the wave. Kherson deputy mayor. Oh, this was an interesting story. So this story I'm bringing up because you guys have asked before, what happens to collaborators when they get caught? Meaning, what happens to the Ukrainians that their local area gets taken over by the Russians? Thank you, Nat. Local area gets taken over by the Russians, and some of the local Ukrainians decide to basically work for the enemy. They say, well, now we're occupied by the Russians. I want a job. I'm going to help the Russians basically occupy, Ukraine. Not good, frowned upon by Ukrainians. And then once the Ukrainians liberate these parts of the country, not surprising, these guys get in trouble. Well, the Kherson deputy mayor, again, Kherson, to show you the map again, Kherson is the region here. It is also the city. The capital of the regions are also named after the region. So the capital of the Kherson region is Kherson. Kherson, the town here north of the river, Ukrainians liberated it, probably a week and a half ago now. And the deputy mayor of the town was arrested. He helped establish communal and housing services for the occupation administration, as well as illegally established law enforcement agencies. So basically, he was helping the Russian administrators occupy the town, and he was helping the police that the Russians set up to basically, keep the Ukrainians in line. He worked for them. I mean, pretty awful stuff. If convicted, he would get 12 years in prison. The good thing is the Ukrainians are not I say good. I wouldn't necessarily care if they did, but they're not executing these collaborators. They tend to be giving them sentences between 12 and 15 years in prison. I've only got a couple more stories. This isn't a very long news day. This was a relatively short news day. So I'll do a few more stories, like I said, and then we'll do the question and answer. All right. So another sip of water. Your mom just made pasticcio. Oh, nice. I know you must take some to me. My mom's got a good pasticcio recipe too. Love it. It's a Greek dish. Very nice. We can talk Greek food afterwards. This was an interesting story just because from American politics and Ukraine and all of that. Gasoline prices in the United States, we call it gasoline, call it diesel, or whatever you call it. I'm already forgetting what you call it in the Brits. You don't say petrol, you say. That's right, petrol. Gasoline prices in the U.S. have fallen below the levels they were at prior to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. This is important because there was a concern, obviously, that, there was a concern that sorry, I'm looking at the people talking about the UK's. I think I put Mom's pasticcio recipe on our Discord. We've got a recipes section on our Discord, so go check it out. You'll find the recipe there. I've already put it there. What's important about this is American gas prices spiked in part because of the war in Ukraine and all the problems with gasoline, with oil exports, the uncertainty with Russia, the price spikes, right? Well, the oil prices have now dropped in half. They were up to like $100 a barrel. I think they're almost down to $50 a barrel. That brings gasoline prices down. This is important because one of the arguments against helping Ukraine is going to be that the war is costing too much to the American taxpayer, right? And if gasoline prices are now at or where they were, basically where they were before the war started, that argument can no longer be used. That's important. Now, I don't know how this works for you Europeans, whether you guys are in a similar situation, although I wouldn't be surprised if it's helped there too, if it hasn't helped there too, because again, we're talking oil is now half the price of where it was. That's good overall for gasoline prices. Slovakia handed over 30 infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine. In return, Slovakia is supposed to get 15 Leopard 2 tanks from Germany. Germany is going to send more Gepard anti-aircraft tanks to Kyiv. That's good. They need to get there, but that's good. And then I've got two whiny quotes from the Russians that I think I want to read because, honestly, it reminds me of Elon Musk, frankly, where, Elon Musk has to be the most aggrieved, richest man on the planet that there is. He's literally the richest man in the world. And you'd think this poor guy lived on the streets. Everything is woe is me. And everybody's an enemy and everyone's out to get him. The Russians, very similar. Listen to this. So this is the Russians talking about why they called off the arms control talks with the Americans, right? At least temporarily. This is from their foreign ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova. In all areas, thank you, Kanausi. In all areas, we note the highest level of toxicity and hostility from Washington. As part of the all-out hybrid war unleashed against us, almost every U.S. step towards Russia is subject to a pathological desire to harm our country wherever possible. These people. You're reading this going, you invaded Ukraine. You're at war because you invaded Ukraine, right? I mean, they are so, the thing is, you've got to, I kind of wonder sometimes if they believe this stuff. I mean, they're clearly doing it for the Russian people, right? But whether they actually believe that, that they hate us because we're so good, and it's like, I mean, but the all-out hybrid war, honey, the all-out hybrid war, you haven't seen war. You're fighting Ukraine and we're giving them some weapons, okay? I mean, imagine what it would be like if Russia actually were at all-out war with the West. They can't beat the Ukrainians. Imagine if they were fighting us. But they're just, but the toxicity and hostility, all we're doing is committing genocide. Why are you so mean to us? So it goes on, though. I've got the next whiny quote. So Dmitry Medvedev, whose name, unfortunately, I've had to learn how to pronounce for this show because he comes up far too often. So Zelensky, Medvedev is he's complaining because, okay, there was some talk at the NATO meeting today. The Poles want to give Patriot missiles to Ukraine, and they actually wanted to give the Patriot missiles that the Germans were offering to Poland in order for Poland to defend itself, because we had the recent mishap of that missile that might have been a Ukrainian missile that came in, right? All that kind of stuff in Poland. So the Germans offered Poland a Patriot missile to defend themselves. And the Poles said, we don't need it, but Ukraine does. Will you let us give it to Poland? And the Germans kind of went, eh. So NATO is now discussing whether, this little lip stuff, NATO is discussing whether or not they think it's a good idea to give Ukraine the Patriot missile defense. Well, Medvedev, who's former, I forget if he was prime minister or what, of Russia, still was, Medvedev, by the way, was the liberal. He was the good guy. This guy was good Russia. He's the one we wanted to take over because we thought, oh, if this guy takes over, everything will be fine, right? Well, he's Looney Tunes. A lot of people think he's an alcoholic, is what they think, but he's also gone like over the deep end. Thank you, Marcy. Like over the deep end. Medvedev, exactly. So listen to this. He's talking about the NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg. If, as Stoltenberg hinted, NATO were to supply the Ukrainian fanatics with Patriot systems, mind you, I didn't explain, the Patriots are anti-aircraft missiles. They take down planes, they take down rockets and missiles. They are a purely defensive system, okay? I am about to keep an eye on the Stuggle person because Stuggle's about to disappear. Medvedev, Okay, but I'm speaking English. Medvedev. I'm not going to say Medvedev in English. It doesn't work that way in English. So in any case, back to dealing with facts here. So okay, yeah. So the system is used to shoot down rockets and missiles. It is not used to attack buildings or anything else. So the Russians shouldn't be worried about it. And the Russians aren't flying that many planes anyway, because the Ukrainians have pretty much shot down the Russian planes, so the Russians can't use their planes. But listen to this. If, as Stoltenberg hinted, NATO were to supply the Ukrainian fanatics with Patriot systems along with NATO personnel, nobody's talking about giving them NATO personnel, they would immediately become a legitimate target of our armed forces. Nobody's talking about giving Ukraine NATO personnel. But also, if this were to happen, if Russia, this is the irony of us being so afraid of Russia and our government saying, oh, we can't give Ukraine these weapons because Russia will get upset and who knows what will happen, right? They'll drag us into the war. Russia is panicked about us entering the war. The last thing Putin wants is for us to enter the war. They would die if we entered the war. Again, Russia is having a hard time fighting against Ukraine. At the beginning of the war, right, just to remind folks, and I mean, Ukraine's got a lot of work to do, mind you, but Russia invades, right? Like, here, more or less here and here-ish, like 4 or 5 fronts, okay? Russia comes down towards Kyiv almost. They come down here. And what happens? The Ukrainians kick their butt. Russia gets kicked out of all of this. I mean, all of the area they were up here, gone. Here around Kharkiv, gone. And now Russia is pretty much occupying area, like this. And then they had stolen this in 2014. So they already had that. So Russia is occupying about 18% of Ukraine. It's still not an insignificant amount because it's 18% of Ukraine. That's not small. But Russia has lost 50% of the land it was occupying. So of all of that land at the top and everything else, that was 100% of what they occupied. Thank you, Joe Warren. But now they lost half of that land. So that's a big deal. The Ukrainians are still advancing. Russia is starting to make some progress. Thank you, Cheryl, for the Aflac duck. Russia is making some progress near Bakhmut in the east, which is a city that's been for 2 months now. A lot of explosives going on. There really wasn't any advance there at all, but the Russians are finally advancing a little bit there. But otherwise, Russia's not doing well. And the prognosis isn't great for Russia. I mean, Ukraine's got to be worried about its electricity and the fuel over the winter, of course, right? And heating. Thank you, CS, for that. But the Russians are worried about their troops. They don't have any good troops left, I'm reading the comments as we go, and it's always dangerous for me to read the comments as I'm talking here. The last thing Russia could handle is NATO entering this war. That's my bottom line. My bottom line is they're having at the very least, Russia isn't winning, okay? I mean, it's not like, Russia's kicking, thank you, Typhoon, for that. It's not like Russia's kicking Ukraine's butt, right? And, oh my God, Ukraine's going to collapse tomorrow and lose all their land. At best, this is a tie. I don't think it's a tie. I think Ukraine is slowly winning, but it could take years for them to win. Russia ain't winning. What do you think is going to happen if all of NATO enters the war, right? What do you think would happen? I mean, Americans don't want to enter the war, but what do you think would happen if America entered the war full-fledged? Russia would lose in a day, right? I mean, their Air Force isn't even working. We would destroy them with our Air Force. Now, we don't want to do that because getting into a war with Russia is dangerous because you've got 2 nuclear powers at war. But the point is, Russia does not want NATO in this war. And mind you, it ain't just the Americans, right? It would be the British, the French, the Germans, the Poles, the Baltic countries. I mean, you've got a lot of military power among these countries. Norway's got a great military, and soon to be Sweden and Finland. The Russians would. So when you hear the Russians making these threats, they would be a legitimate target. It kind of ticks me off because I kind of wish, again, I think Reagan would do this. I mean, I hate to sort of bring, because some people on the left don't like, a lot of people on the left don't like Reagan, but Reagan would go, you know what? Screw you. We're coming anyway. We're going to send the Patriot batteries, and I'm sending NATO, and I'm sending American troops. And if you bomb those American troops, we're at war. And if you really want to be at war with us, go for it. but I got news for you. You're going to lose in a week. And the Russians would go, The Russians, I guarantee you, the Russians would put out an order saying, do not touch the Americans. Don't even come close to touching the Americans. But this is why I get upset. I agree we have to be careful. And I promise you we'll do the questions now. I agree we have to be careful about, getting into a war with Russia, because that potentially is bad. We both have nukes. But what pisses me off is acting from this precedent where America should be really afraid of Vladimir Putin, because if we get into a war with Putin, it could go nuclear. Putin needs to be 1,000 times more afraid of that war than us, because both Putin and Biden know, I would say, or America and Russia, we know a nuclear war, we both lose. But we know a conventional war, the West wins and Russia loses. Russia loses a conventional war. Both sides lose a nuclear war. So if you're Russia, either war sucks. If you're NATO, conventional, we win. Nuclear, we both lose. That means Russia is in a worse position if a war starts. Anyway, that's my point here. I'm not saying we want a war with Russia, but it just, as I said, it ticks me off when we're constantly playing the victim here of, oh, Mr. Putin, please don't go to war with us. We're very afraid of you, because all that does is convince Putin, well, then I'm just going to push even farther. They're afraid of me, Exactly. And a lot of their stuff doesn't work anyway, like Tom is saying, but what we have to assume, we've got to assume Russia's nukes work and all that kind of stuff. We don't really have a choice. We've got to assume it. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. This is my daily show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, where we talk about the latest in the Ukraine war, and then we talk about questions and answers, or questions and answers. I take your questions, and we sort of discuss your guys' thoughts on what's going on here. Do check out, my store. I've got a store set up, too, with a lot of cool Ukrainian-themed stuff for Christmas. It's store.aravosis.com. The easier way, frankly, on TikTok, just go to my profile, the link in my profile, the link tree. I've got my store, I've got my Discord, I've got everything there. Discord has a lot of cool auction items. The link tree. Where was this actually? I was going to show you really quick. I'll show you two things from the store. So the store has got a lot of cool auction items. We've got this one's probably my favorite. It's a Ukrainian. I get really cool stuff from Ukraine from my friend Vlad, who is there, and then we auction it off. Half the proceeds go to benefit my work, this news that I do for you guys, and half of it we're channeling back into humanitarian aid. This is a really cool. This one's probably one of my favorites. It's a Ukrainian Navy beret badge. It goes in the beret. See how the back hooks, and it's the trident it's a trident in an anchor. But it's neat because see, it hooks. I guess you could wear it as a pin too if you wanted to. I never thought about that. It probably would work as a pin, but auctioning this off and a lot of other cool stuff. So and we've got a lot of cool military patches and stuff too. This though, I forget. I've got to check. This might be. I've got to double check. It could be the police headquarters of Kyiv. I forget now, but it's the Archangel Michael, who is the symbol of Kyiv, and it says whatever on the top, I forget now, and Kyiv on the bottom. But we've got it in the Velcro because it goes on the. Oh, you can see on my sweater, it goes on the shoulders of the military outfits and the police outfits. So anyway, we've got a lot of cool stuff. You can check those out in my Discord. Go to aravosis.com or the link in my TikTok profile, and you'll find it. All right, guys, let's do our questions here. I will pull up on TikTok first for you TikTokers. Like I said, you go to my profile. I can also find the questions you guys put here, but sometimes it's easier just to put them in the link. Head Department of Kyiv, exactly. But I forget. I've got it on my list here. I think it's the police headquarters, meaning the head department of who? I believe it's the police. I've got it written down, but I believe it's the police. It's in the auction itself. I mentioned who it is. But yeah, thank you for that, head department. So World's Fair. I know nothing about the World's Fair. Any news about Sweden and Finland? No, other than a few days ago. So this question is about Sweden and Finland joining NATO. NATO agreed to have them join. And then the way it works from there is it goes to each NATO member country and the parliament has to vote on it. Oops, my hair is getting messy. Parliament has to vote on it because NATO is a treaty, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the treaty members have to agree basically to amend the treaty to add this extra person. It has to be unanimous kind of like the EU, I think, where eventually they may realize the unanimity is a bit difficult. So each country's parliament has to agree to the treaty. Okay, it currently is Hungary and Turkey are the last two that have not voted. All the other 28 have said yes. Hungary just came out and said that Orban, I think it was, just came out and said that the Hungarian parliament will vote in favor of of Sweden and Finland joining NATO. That's great. It should happen in early January. Turkey is being a turkey, as always. Erdogan, it just drives me crazy. Erdogan, who is the Turkish wannabe dictator, not to be confused with Orban, who's the Hungarian wannabe dictator, not to be confused with Donald Trump. But in any case, actually, mods, you just got rid of some Greek guy. My sister just told me you got rid of some Greek guy asking in Greek about the Iraqis. I'm not sure why you did that, but maybe let him back in. I think that one might have been a mistake. Sorry, my sister was just letting me know because we speak Greek. She could tell he wasn't being a troll is the point. So maybe if you could see who it was, maybe let him back in if you can. I forgot what I was saying here. Oh, anyway, yeah, but joining. So Turkey's being a pain in the Erdogan always tries to milk things, and I think he's trying to milk whatever he can. He's spamming about NATO not joining Iraq. Oh, okay. He was spamming a bit, sis. Okay. He was spamming. Okay, never mind. If he was spamming, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure you guys knew what was going on. Well, no, if he was spamming, that's fine. If he was spamming. I wasn't sure if you guys couldn't tell that it was Greek, so you weren't sure what was going on. But I forget that you can do the translation thing. If he's spamming, just tell him not to spam. And then if he's truly being, you decide. I just wanted to make sure. Another question here. Whatever happened to the rocket that hit Poland? Did we figure out who shot the rocket? Was a mistake? No official answer yet. The Poles are still investigating. I assume when they're done investigating, we will be told. But there was no answer yet. Thank you, Typhoon, for the very timely soccer ball, especially since America won their match today against Iran. Woo woo. Although I did feel a little bad because the Irani team was the team that actually refused to sing the national anthem or whatever it is they do during the national anthem of Iran as a protest in honor of their people back home. So I was kind of like, I'm glad we won because I'm all for my team. But at the same time, I was like, these seem to be the good guys. So any case, but yeah, oops, sorry. I was already forgetting what we were, let's start again. All right, what were we saying? I was already spacing out on what the question was. Sorry. I was looking here. Iran. Nope, it wasn't Iran. Sorry, I'm totally spacing out now. Cecil, I always forget. Cecil asks, could the UK and Scotland, he's asking about UK and Scotland. He's got to be a Cecil then. He's got to be a Brit. Thank you, Cœur de Leon. Could the UK and Scotland's recent disagreement over sorry, thank you there for the pause, Typhoon. You're as bad as Harvey, Cecil, with these. You guys always have to put stuff to confuse me. Okay. Recent disagreement over a flag that I don't recognize Scotland. Okay, that's Scotland leaving the UK and have an odd political effect on this war. If you've got an opinion. Okay, now I'm going to guess you're Scottish. I have no idea. The thing is, I don't know where Scotland is on all of this. Part of the issue becomes, by the way, what happened if Scotland were to leave the UK, okay, and become an independent country? Does Scotland become a member of NATO? Does Scotland want to be a member of NATO? Right? I mean, so you've got that first question right there. I mean, would Scotland even have a say in what happens inside NATO? Right? Second of all, it would depend where the economic power resides and the military power, right? If Scotland were to leave, well, this is actually kind of a fascinating question. And this is what happened with the Soviet Union, right? When the Soviet Union fell apart, each country kept its nukes. So Ukraine had a bunch of nuclear weapons. when they left, and then they traded them away for promises that Russia would never invade. Ha ha ha! Right? That was kind of a mistake. But sorry, that might have been my uncle calling from out west. Oh yeah. So the question becomes: would Scotland have? What military would Scotland have if they even left? Yeah, they'd have the Outlanders. No, but I mean, you know what I mean. So like, would it weaken the UK's military significantly that they could, even if they wanted to, they wouldn't be able to support Ukraine as much? I don't know. I'm not sure. I guess I'd almost be curious if you've got a take on it. You don't have to pay again, but I mean, if you've got like a take as to why the issue even made you, is there something in the back of your head that's making you think it could have an impact? Because I almost get that kind of an impression from what you're saying, Sorry, I'm looking here to see lots of people weighing in about Scotland here. Interesting. Felix is saying, who's German, I should say, you're not Scottish. For the people of Scotland, if the people of Scotland want to leave, they should be allowed in a democratic and transparent way. But for as long as this war goes, they should probably be united in order to have their full strength. I mean, it would certainly divide the military in parts, I would think. Well, that's the question. Would Scotland have any military? I just don't know how that works. I've been living in Scotland for 15 years. I'm 100% sure a majority of Scottish people would want to join NATO and the EU. Okay, that's interesting. I'm not sure where we stand on NATO. I know the governing party in Scotland, the SNP, want all British nukes out of Scotland. That's interesting. The British nuclear arsenal is based in Scotland. Oh, wow. That's very interesting. Interesting. Very interesting. That is interesting, actually. Well, I would think the Brits would want to get their nukes out if Scotland were leaving. Interesting. Yeah. I just don't know. That's interesting. I mean, but I think it would partially depend on who gets the weapons and who gets the troops, right? You'd think. And I'm going to call you Cecil in the future because now that I know you're probably from the UK. Let me look TikTok here. More TikTok questions. Stop talking, TikTok. Where is this? There it is. Okay, so I'm trying to. You can on TikTok. You can submit the questions via the Q&A link in my profile. Hold on here. Earlier today, Zelensky requested Odessa be the site of the 2030 World's Fair. Oh, that's interesting. Now, my guess is as long as the war is going on, no one's going to have that happen. That's my guess. That they're going to say, well, in principle, you'd hope the war would be over in 7 years, but will it be? Right? Thank you, Carlos. So I'm going to think that it's probably not going to happen for that reason. Although it would be an interesting show of support, but they're not going to want to have the World's Fair be so uncertain, is my guess. With all of the oligarchs in London, I'm pleasantly surprised with how good the UK has been. Do you know how the Brits have been able to keep Russia out? I've been surprised too. We talked about this the other day, or just brought it up briefly, but that this was certainly a concern a lot of folks had going into the war, was that the Russians had invested so much money in London that there was sort of concern as to whether the British government would even be able to join into sanctions, or whether they would be like, oh, I don't know, even though the Brits are great. And clearly Boris Johnson was just like, screw it, we're going in, which was really good. But that surprised me too. Yeah, no, they've been remarkably good, and clearly the money didn't matter at all, which is great. Hang on here. Let me look. I may or may not have more questions from you here. There's the Zelensky thing. With all the war crimes Russia is committing, why won't NATO jump in and put them out of their misery? Because we're afraid of a world war. I mean, that's it. Part of the problem is, to stop the Russians from doing this, we would need to attack Russians, right? We would need to blow up Russian troops. We would need to blow up Russian missile launchers. And who's manning the missile launchers? Russians, right? That means America would be killing the Russians. We'd be at war with Russia. And then you're talking, the risk of a very large conflict. And, Americans start fighting there. The problem is then you'd have America and Russia at war. Would we start bombing each other's ships at sea? Right? Would we start going into Russia proper across the border of Ukraine? I get why we're worried about that. What bothers me is if and honestly, we're so afraid of this being a proxy war. Of course it's a proxy war. Who cares? That's funny. Dan Metcalf just said the same thing. We sort of already are. It's a proxy war. The only thing is a proxy war is different. The Russians, which I didn't even know this, the Russians were providing airplanes to like the North Vietnamese in Vietnam. So the Russians were absolutely killing American troops in Vietnam. This is something that's considered allowed. It is considered okay to arm the other guy's enemy without you officially being at war with the other guy, or the other guy's enemy. In other words, it's considered okay for us to arm Ukraine. That doesn't mean we're at war with Ukraine or we're at war with Russia. And Russia does the same thing. Russia was arming the Sandinistas, and we were arming the rebels going after the Sandinistas. The Sandinistas. Well, all of that, right? So, I wish we would just own up to it and say, yeah, we're arming. A proxy war, I shouldn't have used the term. A proxy war, a proxy is a legal term meaning for someone else. So like your medical power of attorney in a way is a proxy saying, I'm going to let you make this decision for me. So you have my proxy. A proxy is used in like boards of directors. It can even be used in voting shares for companies, where basically it can be used for your condominium. Your condo board is meeting and they're having the annual vote on who's on the board. You can sign your proxy to someone else and you could say, okay, John, you're going to be at the meeting. I know I'm not. Sign this letter that says, yes, I give John Aravosis my proxy to vote in the board meeting on this date. You sign it in the bottom, you give it to me. I go to the meeting and I say, I have Maria's proxy and I vote for Joe. And now I'm voting as myself and I also vote for Joe. That's what a proxy is. So the idea of a proxy war is when outside powers who aren't parties to the war are actually fighting in the war anyway. So even though it's Russia versus Ukraine, it's a proxy war in some ways between America and Russia. But when the Russians talk about it being, in other words, America and Russia are at war, but we're not. The Russians try to use it in a way to diminish Ukraine. Oh, we're not fighting Ukraine. We're fighting America, right? Like BS. Of course you're fighting Ukraine. And they try to sort of diminish the Ukrainians, and the Russians also try to do it in a way because it buttresses, I guess, support at home, because it's true. The Russians are doing horribly, and it's much easier for the Russians to be able to say we're losing to America than to say we're losing to the Ukrainians, because they expect to lose to America. They don't expect to lose to Ukraine, right? So in any case, that's what a proxy war is. Fred Hofeld. What are your thoughts about the White House weighing whether to label Russia's Wagner Group as a foreign terrorist organization? I saw that today. I want to know. So, okay. Yeah, there was just a story that came out last couple hours. The White House is considering whether to label or designate this mercenary group, private army, the Wagner Group, run by a Russian oligarch, one of the corrupt billionaire friends of Putin. And Wagner Group, does these mercenaries. They sell their troops all over the world, and they're using a lot of them in Ukraine as well. And the White House is considering designating them a terrorist organization. The question becomes, so what? I know there's, well, okay, actually, this isn't a so what. This is actually interesting. I was going to say, it depends what the legal ramifications are of that. I remember when the issue of whether we should designate Russia a terrorist state, I know when that issue came up, the arguments in favor were, if we did that, Russian diplomats would potentially no longer have protections, either in country, but also from the courts. So individual Ukrainians could potentially sue the Russians, for example, right? So that's an interesting idea. Also, individual Ukrainians could sue for the money we are holding that belongs to the Russian government, because if Russia's a terrorist organization, then thank you, Supernatural. Have a good night. If Russia's a terrorist organization, then individual Ukrainians could potentially sue to access the $300 billion we've got frozen of Russian assets. So that's interesting. I am not sure what happens if Wagner Group is designated terrorist because, for example, Wagner Group isn't military, they're mercenaries, so you could probably sue them anyway if you could get your hands on them right there in Russia or whatever. So I guess my question is, I don't understand what the legal implications are, and I just don't know. I don't know what the legal implications are of that. While I'm talking or while we're talking about this, we've got 5 more minutes. If somebody wants to just Google, I'm just kind of curious. The legal ramifications are that it's a pretext to justifying legally war against Russia. I don't think so, though. I don't think so. Because honestly, we could legally justify it right now. I mean, not even legally justify it. We could just go in and help Ukraine. We could go in and say, we're not going to war with Russia, but we're going to set up missile batteries all across Russia, all across Ukraine, and we're going to have American troops there. And, but we're not going to have Americans attack the Russians. And if the Russians attack the Americans, then I guess we're at war, and that's Russia's choice. No, I understand you're saying you studied this, but my point is, why is it a justification for the U.S. going to war? I don't see that. Because we could just go to war with Russia if we want anyway. And actually, as I just said, the way it would happen, we wouldn't go to war with Russia. We would put our troops there and say, well, now we've got American troops all over Ukraine. Hell, if I really wanted to be ballsy, I would say, I'm not saying I would do this, but if I really wanted to be edgy, aggressive American president, we're sending 100,000 American troops to Ukraine. They're going to be spread all over the country. And I would have done this before the war started and say, Russia, if you want to invade, that's your choice, but there's going to be 100,000 U.S. troops there. And if you kill one of them or injure one of them, we're at war. If you don't, we're not at war. It's your choice, Mr. Putin. America isn't going to declare a war. Russia's going to declare a war. So I would not be looking for justifications because first of all, I hate to say this, but the U.S. doesn't really worry about the legal niceties of how you get into war. I know we probably should. And having said that, we do. I mean, okay, I say that. We always do give a legal framework when we invade or bomb or whatever. But honestly, we would find that framework anyway. I mean, the UN Charter, I forget what it is, whether it's the self-defense thing or whatever else, you can very easily justify any war you want by the UN Charter. So I'm just telling you as an American foreign policy guy, we wouldn't sit there and say, gosh, we really want to go to war with Russia, but how do we do it legally? Maybe we should do this, Wagner terrorist thing. Like I said, we would just send our troops there and say, you touch them, we're at war. And if we're not at war, great. Our troops are there helping and you can't stop it. Ben, is the postponement of the New START arms treaty something to be concerned about, or is it just the Russia's whining again? It's funny, actually. I don't know if you were here earlier. I was actually reading a quote from the Russian foreign ministry, and I said just that. They're whining. And this was the quote where she was talking about, sorry, my chapstick, my lips have been so dry here. And she goes, in all areas, we note the highest level of toxicity and hostility from Washington. As part of an all-out hybrid war unleashed against us, almost every U.S. step towards Russia is subject to a pathological desire to harm our country wherever possible. You can hear her voice just going up with each step. And she's saying that's why they pulled out of the arms control talks. Generally speaking, I mean, they are being whiny, Russians. Generally speaking, arms control talks are a good thing. I just think that's always a good thing. It's helpful. And even in the worst of times with the Russians, we made a point of continuing to talk about arms control. The Russians are trying to freak us out. Arms control talks provide stability. If I were Putin, I would have called off the talks too. Because, and I'm sorry, but Biden, from my perspective, has done an excellent job with this war, But the one thing he's done a bad job is he's telegraphed too many times to Putin that we're afraid of him and that we're afraid of making Putin angry, right? And all this publicly, this public discussion about, if Putin gets mad, what will he do? Will it be World War III? Oh, well, if we're constantly worrying about Putin being upset and World War III and if Putin's in a corner, what would he do? If I'm Putin, I want to convince you I'm in a corner. I'm upset. I'm radicalized. I don't want to be engaging in arms control talks that make you feel like things are okay, right? If we're having arms control talks with Russia, then it means the war is bad, but clearly our relationship is okay. On the most dangerous stuff like nuclear war and nuclear arms, we're able to have an open and honest debate and an open and honest negotiation and maybe even a treaty. Well, that means the war isn't that dangerous. So if I'm Putin, I say no talks. So it's not a good thing, but at the same time, he's playing us like he always is, I think. That's my guess. Google Translator on TikTok, it's kind of cool. You can translate the stuff, and I don't know. I've always found it pretty good, depending. We can do, thanks, Vincente. See you tomorrow. Let me look, maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll call it quits, guys, because it's 6 o'clock, or it's on the hour, and I like to not go too late for my voice. And tonight I'm going over to the Discord, and we're going to hang out a little bit. So let me look for maybe one more question here. If there is one. With all the weapons and money being sent to Ukraine, will contracts have been made to get it? A little like China investing in other countries. Oh, I guess what you're asking is, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll do a recap too. I don't know whether the U.S. is doing anything to sort of help ensure that America gets something out of this in the end. Knowing us, I would guess probably not. The Chinese are probably much better at saying, well, if we're coming in and helping you, we want, exclusive access to your titanium mine or whatever it is. I'm guessing we're probably not that good. But also I will say, I think we're nicer than that, so we may not be as manipulative. Otherwise, we would own Kuwait's oil, and we don't. And that always pisses me off. I don't think we should own Kuwait's oil, but collectively, and it was America taking the lead, we saved Kuwait's butt, and Kuwait should have been helping us every step of the way forever, as far as oil prices and everything else. And I feel like Kuwait's now kind of like, oh yeah, whatever. So that kind of annoys me. All right, let me do a quick recap of the top stories that we covered today, and then we'll call it quits. And I'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. All right, but I'm going over to my Discord. What did I say? Discord.aravosis.com. I'm already forgetting discord.aravosis.com, and we will hang out and chat there. And you guys can check out the stuff that we're auctioning off as well. NATO foreign ministers pledged that one day Ukraine will be a member. Thank you for that, Hart. Who is that? L. The U.S. is giving aid for Ukraine's electrical infrastructure and hoping that the Europeans will step up as well. The Ukraine may have hit a power plant, a power supply facility across the border in Russia. We don't know. Kind of interesting if they did. The Pope gave a really awful statement today about how basically a lot of crimes and bad things have been committed against the Ukrainians, but we all know it wasn't really the Russians. People of the Russian tradition, it was the Chechens. In other words, Christian Russia is good Russia. They would never do bad things to hurt people. Speaking of the Christian Russians, Ukraine has registered nearly 48,000 alleged Russian war crimes to date. The Daily Beast says that Russia's Wagner Group is freeing hardened rebels held in jail cells in the Central African Republic and deploying them overseas, including in Ukraine. Ukrainian prosecutors say that the deputy mayor of the town of Kherson is detained for allegedly collaborating with the Russians while the city was occupied by the Russians. If convicted, he would get up to 12 years in prison. Gasoline prices in the U.S. have fallen below the levels they were at prior to Putin's invasion of Ukraine, I should say, not of the U.S. Slovakia just handed over 30 infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine. Germany is sending more Gepard anti-aircraft tanks to Kyiv. The Russians are whining about arms control. I just read that quote again. And Medvedev, who was the former, I always forget, I keep saying prime minister, I keep forgetting what his job was, basically whined that if we send Patriot missiles to Ukraine, the Russians might attack us. And I did an explanation of why he, like every Russian, is bluffing, because the last thing Russia wants is for us to enter the war, because they know we'd kick their butt. All right, guys, thank you for joining me. I am going over to the Discord. Go discord.aravosis.com. Go join us over there if you would. Otherwise, thank you for the gifts. Thank you for the moderators and everybody. Thank you, my Greek friends. I saw a lot of the Greeks were on there, and I did see what you guys were writing, but I was in the middle of talking, so I do understand some Greek. Yes, somebody was asking in Greek if I understand Greek. I do, to a degree. So thank you guys for all of that, and let's go over to the Discord, and we can talk. We can talk food over there. All right, you guys, goodbye, and then I'm hanging up with the YouTubers or with the TikTokers.